It was 2:47 in the morning when the quiet of Riverside General Hospital broke apart. The night shift had been slow, almost peaceful, the kind of night where nurses drink lukewarm coffee and talk about their weekend plans while machines beep softly in the background. Mara Delgado, a 29-year-old trauma nurse, had just finished writing notes on her last patient. Her shoulders ached, her eyes were heavy. She glanced at the clock and told herself that in a few hours, this long shift would finally be over. Then the intercom crackled to life. Mass casualty incoming. Multi-vehicle pileup on Route 9. ETA 6 minutes. The words seemed to echo through the hallway. Mara felt her tiredness disappear in an instant, replaced by a sharp, focused energy that came from years of experience. She had heard calls like this before, but something about the tone of the dispatcher's voice told her this one was different. This one was big. Across town, Dr. Elliot Vance, the hospital's trauma chief, was enjoying a rare night away from the hospital. He had worked in trauma medicine for over 15 years and had earned this one quiet evening at home. He was halfway through a cup of tea when his pager buzzed violently on the kitchen table. He read the message twice, grabbed his coat, and was out the door within minutes. Some part of him, the old instinct that never really rested, told him this call could not wait until morning. By the time Dr. Vance arrived at the hospital, the emergency bay was already alive with motion. Ambulances lined up outside, their red and blue lights flashing across the walls. Paramedics rushed through the doors carrying stretchers, shouting vital signs and details of the crash. 6 patients, 6 critical cases, all arriving within minutes of each other. Vance pushed through the doors, expecting to find controlled panic, the usual mixture of urgency and confusion that came with a night like this. Instead, he found something that stopped him in his tracks. At the center of the chaos stood Mara, calm and steady, directing the flow of the room like a conductor leading an orchestra through its most difficult piece. Her voice was clear, her hands moved with precision. She did not hesitate, did not panic, and did not wait for permission. The first patient rolled in was a teenage boy, no older than 16, gasping for air with lips turning a pale shade of blue. Mara took one look at his chest, listened for a moment with her stethoscope, and immediately called for a needle to relieve the pressure building inside his lung. She performed the procedure herself, her hands steady despite the urgency, and within seconds, his breathing eased. The surgeon assigned to his case had not even finished scrubbing in. Before the team could catch their breath, the next patient arrived. A mother in her 30s, her face pale, her pulse racing. Mara recognized the signs of internal bleeding before the lab results confirmed it. She called for blood immediately, insisting on O negative until the woman's blood type could be matched. It was a decision that saved crucial minutes, and minutes, in trauma medicine, often meant the difference between life and death. Dr. Vance stood by the doorway, watching in silence. He had trained countless nurses and doctors throughout his career. He had seen skill before, seen dedication, seen nurses who worked hard and cared deeply about their patients. But what he was witnessing now was something else entirely. It was instinct sharpened by experience, confidence built on countless nights just like this one. The third patient was an elderly man who had gone into cardiac arrest just as the ambulance doors opened. The team began chest compressions immediately, but Mara noticed something unusual. A faint asymmetry in his pulse, a subtle sign that most people would have missed in the rush of the moment. She suspected a tear in his aorta, a condition that required immediate and very specific care. She voiced her concern to the attending physician, who at first hesitated, unsure if there was time to investigate further. Mara insisted, calmly but firmly, and further examination confirmed her suspicion. The man was rushed into surgery within minutes, a decision that likely saved his life. By now, the emergency room looked like a battlefield. Doctors and nurses moved from bed to bed, monitors beeped in overlapping rhythms, and the smell of antiseptic filled the air. Yet in the middle of it all, Mara remained a source of stability. She spoke to frightened patients with a gentle voice, reassuring them even as she worked quickly to stabilize their injuries. She guided younger nurses through procedures they had never performed under such pressure, calmly explaining each step even as her hands continued their work. The fourth and fifth patients arrived together, a young couple who had been driving home from a late dinner when their car was struck from the side. Both had suffered head injuries, and both were drifting in and out of consciousness. Mara assessed them quickly, checking pupil response, questioning them gently to test their awareness, and calling for immediate scans. She understood that with head injuries, time was everything. The brain could not wait. She pushed for imaging to be prioritized, coordinating with the radiology team so there would be no delay. As she worked, Dr. Vance found himself stepping closer, watching not as the chief overseeing his department, but as a student watching a master at work. He noticed the way she checked in with each patient, even in the middle of crisis, offering a few words of comfort before moving to the next task. He noticed how she never raised her voice, even when the room grew tense, and how the staff around her seemed to draw strength from her calm presence. The sixth patient came in just before 4 in the morning, a construction worker who had been driving home after a night shift of his own. His injuries were severe, a broken leg, cracked ribs, and signs of internal bleeding that needed urgent attention. By this point, the team was exhausted, running on adrenaline and sheer determination. Mara felt the fatigue too, a heaviness in her legs and a dryness in her throat, but she pushed through it. She had seen exhaustion before. She knew how to work past it. She stabilized his ribs, arranged for an ultrasound to check the extent of internal bleeding, and coordinated with the surgical team to prepare him for the operating room. Every action was deliberate. Every decision was calculated, yet made in a fraction of the time it would normally take. Slowly, one by one, each patient was stabilized. The teenage boy was resting comfortably, his breathing steady. The mother had received the blood she needed and was preparing for surgery. The elderly man was already in the operating room, his condition critical but manageable thanks to the early diagnosis. The young couple had been sent for scans, both showing signs of improvement. The construction worker was stable and ready for transfer to surgery. By 5:15 in the morning, the emergency bay, which only 20 minutes earlier had been filled with chaos and urgency, grew quiet. The sound of sirens outside had faded. The frantic energy of the room settled into something calmer, more controlled. Nurses cleaned equipment. Residents wrote notes. The soft, steady beep of monitors replaced the shouting and rushing of the past 2 hours. Mara stood near one of the now empty gurneys, wiping sweat from her forehead with the back of her hand. Her scrubs were wrinkled, her hair falling loose from its tie, but there was a quiet satisfaction in her eyes. 6 patients had come through those doors in critical condition. 6 patients were now stable, thanks in large part to her quick thinking and steady hands. Dr. Vance approached her slowly. He had spent the last 2 hours watching in near silence, absorbing every decision she made, every instinct she followed. He had many questions. How had she known to perform the needle decompression before imaging confirmed the collapsed lung? How had she recognized the signs of an aortic tear that even an experienced physician had initially overlooked? How had she managed to coordinate 6 critical cases almost single-handedly, without losing composure even once? He stopped in front of her, studying her face for a moment, before finally speaking. "Who trained you?" he asked. There was something raw in his voice, a mixture of disbelief and genuine respect. In 15 years of trauma medicine, he had trained dozens of nurses and residents. He had seen skill, dedication, and even brilliance before. But tonight was different. Tonight, he had watched a single nurse manage what should have required an entire team of specialists, and she had done it with a calmness that seemed almost impossible under the circumstances. Mara looked at him for a moment, then glanced around the room at the empty beds, now clean and ready for the next patients who would inevitably come through those doors. She thought about the years that had led to this night, the mistakes she had made early in her career, the nights she had gone home replaying every decision, wondering what she could have done differently. She thought about the patients she had lost, the ones whose faces still visited her in quiet moments, reminding her of the weight of her responsibility. "Every shift I've ever worked that went wrong," she said finally, "I made sure it wouldn't happen twice." For a long moment, Dr. Vance said nothing. He simply looked at her, taking in the simplicity and honesty of her answer. It was not the response he had expected, yet it explained everything. Her skill was not the product of some formal, extraordinary training beyond what any nurse received. It was the result of years of careful attention, of learning from every failure, of refusing to let the same mistake happen twice. It was the product of relentless dedication, hidden beneath a quiet and humble exterior. He nodded slowly, a gesture that, in the world of trauma medicine, carried more weight than words ever could. It was the kind of acknowledgement reserved for those who had truly earned it. News of that night spread quickly through the hospital in the days that followed. Nurses spoke about it in the break room, exchanging stories about the trauma chief who had been left speechless by a night shift nurse. Residents recounted the details to their attending physicians, some with admiration, others with quiet disbelief, that one person could manage so much under such pressure. Even hospital administrators heard whispers of the story, intrigued by the night 6 critical patients were saved by the composed skill of a single nurse. Dr. Vance, a man not easily impressed after years of witnessing extraordinary cases, took the unusual step of writing a formal commendation for Mara's personnel file. It was the first commendation he had written in over 5 years, a rare gesture from a man known for his high standards and reserved praise. In it, he described her actions that night in detail, noting not just her technical skill, but her composure, her leadership, and her ability to inspire confidence in those working alongside her. For Mara, however, the recognition meant little compared to the quiet satisfaction of knowing that 6 people had survived a night that could have easily taken their lives. She did not see herself as extraordinary. She did not think of herself as a hero. To her, it was simply the job, done the way she believed it should always be done. When her shift finally ended at 7 that morning, she changed out of her scrubs, grabbed a cup of coffee from the vending machine near the entrance, and walked out into the early morning light. The sun was just beginning to rise over the parking lot, casting a soft golden glow across the hospital grounds. She felt the familiar ache of exhaustion settle into her body, but beneath it was something else, a quiet sense of purpose that made every difficult night worth it. She drove home in silence, replaying the events of the night in her mind, not with pride, but with the same careful reflection she brought to every shift. She thought about what had gone right, and what she might do differently next time. She thought about the patients now resting in recovery, hoping they would heal well and return to their lives. As she pulled into her driveway and stepped out of her car, she allowed herself a small, tired smile. Another night was behind her. Another set of lives had been given a second chance. And somewhere in the hospital she had just left, a trauma chief who had seen it all was still thinking about the night a single nurse reminded him why he had chosen this profession in the first place. For Mara, there would be another shift tomorrow, and another after that. There would be more emergencies, more critical moments, more lives hanging in the balance. But for now, she allowed herself a moment of rest, knowing that she had done everything she could, and that 6 people would wake up today because of it. That, to her, was more than enough.